What if the guitarist who built one of rock's most haunting sounds learned his trade in Jimi Hendrix's shadow, then watched the industry forget him overnight? A racehorse named in the sports pages gave his greatest song its title. The Beatles' own sound engineer crafted its unforgettable tone. Bridge of Sighs reached number 7 in America, then radio went silent. This is the rise and fall of Robin Trower. Robin Trower was born on March 9th, 1945, in London, and grew up in the seaside town of Southend-on-Sea, a place that didn't look like much on a map, but turned out to be one of the most fertile breeding grounds for British rock talent in the early 1960s. It was a tight community of musicians, all chasing the same dream, all feeding off the same raw energy that was reshaping popular music on both sides of the Atlantic. In 1962, Trower helped form a band called the Paramounts, alongside pianist and vocalist Gary Brooker, bass player Chris Copping, and drummer B.J. Wilson. They were a high-energy R&B outfit, heavily influenced by James Brown and Ray Charles, 4 South End school kids who believed that American soul music was the most honest thing they'd ever heard. The Rolling Stones noticed them early, recognized the raw authenticity in their approach, and helped them land spots on the package tour circuit as the Stones themselves moved up to larger venues. Before we continue, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. Between 1963 and 1965, the Paramounts cut a series of singles for a record, but the studio never quite captured what they delivered live. Trower later recalled that their recordings were all echo, technically tidy, but emotionally hollow compared to what happened on stage. When the Paramounts dissolved in 1966, Trower found himself in a kind of musical limbo. Then, Gary Brooker formed Procol Harum, and A Whiter Shade of Pale became one of the defining songs of 1967. Trower joined the band shortly after, replacing the original guitarist. It gave him his first taste of international stages and real audiences, but it never gave him what he truly needed. Procol Harum was built around Brooker's piano and the Hammond organ of Matthew Fisher. The guitar was important, but it was never the centerpiece. Trower once admitted that while he was with Procol Harum, the only time he saw his guitar was when he walked on stage or into the studio. For a man who heard the world through 6 strings, that was a slow suffocation. He kept writing. He kept pushing. On the 1969 album A Salty Dog, he co-wrote Too Much Between Us, adding a more introspective, guitar-colored mood to the band's sound. On Home and Broken Barricades, he contributed heavier, more guitar-driven tracks like Whiskey Train. And then came a song called Song for a Dreamer, a tribute to Jimi Hendrix, who had just died. That song wasn't just a farewell to a fallen hero, it was a declaration. Trower had found the direction he wanted to go. The only question was whether he was brave enough to walk away from everything he had in order to get there. In 1971, Robin Trower left Procol Harum. He was 26 years old, an experienced professional in an industry that was already moving fast, and he had exactly 0 guarantees about what came next. It was one of the bolder creative gambles of that era, walking away from a successful band with an established audience to chase a sound that only existed clearly in his own head. His first attempt was a band called Jude, a short-lived project that featured singer Frankie Miller and a Scottish bass player and vocalist named James Dewar. Jude didn't last, but James Dewar did. Dewar had a voice that was difficult to categorize. It sat somewhere between hard rock and deep soul, warm and gritty at the same time, the kind of voice that made a simple lyric feel like a confession. Trower recognized immediately that Dewar was the missing piece. When Jude fell apart, he didn't go looking for anyone else. He built a trio around the two of them, adding drummer Reg Isidore to complete the lineup. The decision to work as a power trio was deliberate and philosophical. Trower had watched what Jimi Hendrix and Cream accomplished with minimal personnel and maximum intensity. A trio forced everything into the open. There was nowhere to hide and nowhere to waste space. Every note had to mean something. He also made the decision to name the band after himself, not out of ego, but out of practicality. He believed that collective band names were fragile. If the key member left, the name became meaningless. His name, attached to his sound, was something that couldn't be taken from him. In 1973, the Robin Trower Band released their debut album, Twice Removed from Yesterday. Produced by former Procol Harum bandmate Matthew Fisher, the record introduced what would become Trower's signature approach: slow-burn grooves, soaring guitar lines, and an atmosphere so thick it felt physical. It reached number 106 on the US Billboard charts, which wasn't headline news. But it caught the ears of FM radio programmers who were hunting for exactly this kind of music. Robin Trower had found his audience. Now, he needed to give them something they'd never forget. In April 1974, Robin Trower released Bridge of Sighs. What followed was the kind of breakthrough that most musicians spend entire careers chasing and never find. The album reached number 7 on the US Billboard charts and stayed on those charts for 31 weeks. It was certified gold, and the title track, that slow, dense, doom-drenched opening riff rising out of near silence, became one of the most recognizable sounds on American FM radio. The song had a strange origin. Trower had carried the first line of the lyric for years, turning it over in his mind without ever finding the right title to anchor the whole thing. Then one morning, reading the sports pages, he spotted the name of a racehorse, Bridge of Sighs. Something clicked. The title gave the song its identity: mournful, historical, heavy with things left unsaid. The recording itself was a technical achievement. Sound engineer Jeff Emmerich, the man who had helped shape the sonic architecture of the Beatles' greatest albums, brought his meticulous, atmosphere-driven approach to the sessions. He carefully balanced close and ambient microphone placement to capture not just the amp, but the air around it. The result was a guitar tone that felt like it was coming from inside the walls, enormous, but never harsh. The entire album was recorded in just 16 to 17 days, a reflection of how completely prepared the band was after years of relentless touring. At the center of the sound was Trower's Fender Stratocaster, run through a Shinee Uni Vibe, a phase-shifting pedal that produced what fans and critics called a thick and chewy psychedelic tone. He used the middle pickup, cranked the mid-range, and cut both treble and bass. The result was something genuinely new, a tone that felt alive, that breathed, that seemed to move around the room when you heard it through a good pair of speakers late at night. That sound had a way of finding you. Later in 1974, Trower made a change that would deepen the band's sound even further. He replaced drummer Reg Isidore with Bill Lorden, formerly of Sly and the Family Stone. Lorden brought a funk sophistication that Isidore hadn't possessed, an ability to lock into a groove that was simultaneously heavy and fluid. Trower was fascinated by Lorden's capacity to shift between up-tempo funk patterns and the slow, hypnotic pulse that defined the Trower sound. The Dewar-Lorden lineup became what many fans and historians consider the definitive version of the Robin Trower Band. The momentum continued into 1975 with 4 Earth Below, which climbed even higher, reaching number 5 on the US charts and earning another gold certification. Trower was now headlining arenas across America, no longer opening for anyone. Fans who attended those shows recalled the total immersive quality of the experience, the way the band locked into a groove and held it. The crowd drawn in and held there, song after song, in a kind of collective trance. At a 1975 show in Houston, the crowd witnessed Trower's band deliver a performance so commanding that Humble Pie, the headliners, found themselves in an impossible position. Robin Trower was, without question, one of the biggest guitar heroes on the planet. In 1976, Long Misty Days reached number 24 on the US charts. In 1977, In City Dreams reached number 25. Both went gold. By every conventional measure, Robin Trower was still succeeding. But something had shifted in the atmosphere, something that didn't show up in the chart numbers yet, but that anyone paying attention could feel. Long misty days. The music world was changing at a speed that left many established artists struggling to find their footing. Punk had arrived in Britain with an aggressive contempt for everything that the classic rock era had built. Disco was pulling millions of listeners toward a completely different kind of sound. And somewhere beneath both of those movements, the long-form atmospheric blues rock that had made Robin Trower an arena headliner was beginning to feel, to radio programmers at least, like a relic of the recent past. The sprawling, slow-building instrumental tracks that FM stations had embraced in the early and mid-70s were giving way to more compact, hook-driven sounds. Bands like Journey and Foreigner were ascending. Their music was polished, melodic, and engineered for immediate impact. Trower's music demanded patience, attention, and a willingness to sit inside a groove for 4 or 5 minutes before the payoff arrived. He continued recording. Caravan to Midnight in 1978 reached number 37 on the US charts. Victims of the Fury in 1980 reached number 34. The decline was gradual rather than catastrophic, but the direction was unmistakable. Radio support for new material was shrinking. The older songs stayed in rotation. Bridge of Sighs never entirely disappeared from the airwaves, but the new records struggled to break through. Trower never changed his approach to accommodate the shifting tastes. He remained committed to what he called emotional power, the belief that a guitar note sustained at the right moment, with the right tone, could communicate something that no amount of technical speed or radio-friendly arrangement could match. That commitment was admirable. It was also, in commercial terms, increasingly costly. By the early 1980s, the landscape had changed completely, and Robin Trower found himself standing outside it. MTV launched in August 1981, and almost overnight it rewrote the rules for what it meant to be a rock musician. Image mattered as much as sound. Short, visually compelling videos were the new currency. The slow, atmospheric blues rock that Trower had built his career on didn't fit the format. There was no obvious way to translate that sound into a 3-minute video that would compete with what the new wave acts and the emerging arena rock bands were delivering to the screen. Trower attempted to adapt. He collaborated with former Cream bass player Jack Bruce, a musician he genuinely admired, producing BLT in 1981 and Truce in 1982. BLT reached number 37 on the US charts, a modest result that suggested the collaboration generated some interest. But it didn't recapture the mainstream imagination. The pairing of two genuine guitar-era legends failed to produce the commercial spark that either of them needed. In 1984, Trower split from his record label, the same label that had been his home for the entirety of his major commercial run. It was the end of a decade-long relationship, and the clearest possible signal that the industry had moved on. He was no longer a priority. The man whose name had sold out arenas across America just 8 years earlier was now without a major label deal. He took stock, he reassessed, and somewhere in that period of reflection, he reached a conclusion that said more about his character than any chart position ever had. He was no longer interested in shifting units or shaping his music around the expectations of record executives. He had spent his career chasing a specific sound, a specific emotional truth. He had found it on Bridge of Sighs. He intended to keep pursuing it, whether or not the industry was listening. After the split with his record label, Robin Trower did something that required more courage than most people recognized. He kept going. Through the mid to late 1980s, he continued recording and releasing music on smaller labels. Passion in 1987 reached just outside the top 100 on the US charts, a far cry from the top 10 peaks of a decade earlier, but proof that a devoted audience was still there, still paying attention, still seeking out his records. In the 1990s, Trower took full control of his artistic output, releasing music independently through his own studio. It was a liberating decision. He later described it as the ability to record music exactly the way I wanted it. No label interference, no commercial pressure, no conversations about what radio programmers would or wouldn't play. Albums like 20th Century Blues in 1994 and Someday Blues in 1997 reflected a musician who had made peace with his place in the landscape and was now making music purely on his own terms. The venues were smaller, the crowds were more intimate, and Trower, perhaps surprisingly, admitted to enjoying the stage more in those years than he had during the arena period. At closer quarters, the music breathed differently. The connection between the band and the audience was more immediate, more personal, but the era was also marked by deep personal sorrow. James Dewar, the voice that had been inseparable from the sound of Robin Trower at his peak, had suffered a series of strokes caused by a rare medical condition. He spent his final years in a hospital in Scotland, far from the stages where his voice had once moved thousands of people to silence. In May 2002, James Dewar passed away at the age of 59. His death was felt deeply by everyone who had followed Trower's music through the great years. James Dewar had been one of the most underrated vocalists of his generation, a singer whose voice carried the full weight of the songs he sang. The loss was irreplaceable, and Trower knew it. Robin Trower spent the better part of 2 decades largely invisible on mainstream rock radio. But decades have a way of revealing what was real and what was simply fashionable. The 50th anniversary of Bridge of Sighs arrived in 2024, and with it came deluxe reissues, renewed critical attention, and a new generation of listeners discovering the album for the first time through streaming platforms and classic rock playlists. What they found was something that hadn't aged. The opening notes of the title track still carried the same weight, the same sense of impending darkness and emotional depth that they had carried in 1974. Among guitarists specifically, Trower's influence had never fully receded. Joe Bonamassa, one of the most respected blues rock guitarists of the modern era, spoke openly about studying Trower's tone and technique in exhaustive detail. The slow burn philosophy, the idea that tempo is irrelevant as long as emotional power is present, had become a foundational principle for an entire lineage of blues rock players who came up after Trower's commercial peak had passed. The gear itself became a subject of study. Trower set up the Fender Stratocaster, the Marshall Superlead heads. The Shinee Univibe was analyzed and recreated by guitarists trying to understand how a relatively simple chain of equipment produced something so immediately distinctive. He had never chased vintage mystique or rare vintage instruments. He selected his Stratocasters based on their acoustic resonance, chosen fresh off the rack. The results spoke for themselves. Even in his late 70s, Trower kept releasing new music, including his 2023 studio album, Joyful Sky. And for the generation that grew up with Bridge of Sighs, the album remained a fixed point, a place you could return to, a sound that still knew exactly where to find you. Robin Trower never stopped playing. He never stopped chasing the tone, and the music never stopped mattering to the people who had found it. Robin Trower never ruled the charts the way some of his contemporaries did. He ruled something harder to measure, the late-night FM moment when the right song found you at exactly the right time. The radio eventually moved on. The arenas went dark. But that sound never really left. It just waited. And it's still waiting, in every note of Bridge of Sighs, for the next listener willing to slow down and listen. What's your memory of Robin Trower? Drop it in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more deep dives into rock's forgotten heroes.